This course is based on the 2018 International Building Code and the 2018 International Residential Code. This is for the National Standard Building Contractors exam. This exam is accepted in many states around the country, so check where you can use this. I know, again, many states will reciprocate with the ICC exam if they don't have state contractor licensing or state exams specific to construction. So again, we've got 3 courses. Be sure you're familiar with which course you need. The G11 is for commercial only. The G12 is for residential and commercial. And the G13 is for residential only. So we need the IRC for the residential only. We need the IBC for the commercial only. And we need the IRC and the IBC both for the G12, which is the combined. So again, G11, commercial only. G12, residential and commercial. G13, residential only. Okay? So some of these questions that we're going to go over in the video are going to be very similar to what you can expect to see on the exam. But the idea of this course is more to teach you how to read and interpret the code than it is to answer a specific question for you. So again, I want you to know we're going to be covering specific test questions that very similar to what you're going to see on the exam. So you will be prepared for some actual questions on the exam. But again, the goal of this course is not just to, this is the question, this is the answer. The goal of this course is, if this were the question, how would I find the answer? So the benefit of this, as far as we're concerned, is not only does it prepare you for the G11, 12, or 13, but it also will help you be able to pass any trade exam as it relates to the codes. So also this is built on the International Code Council, the IBC and IRC. But again, my opinion is once you know how to read and interpret a code book, you can read and interpret any code book you want. So it's just a matter of paying attention. So the 2 things you're going to really hear me preach about in regard to code interpretation and code understanding is interpretation and context. So these 2 are keys to being successful with using any code book. One of the biggest problems people have with the code is they cross their fingers and they start flipping through the code book just hoping they're going to find what they're looking for. And the odds of that, these code books are 500 to 800 pages long, some of them. So again, the odds of that are not very likely that you're going to be able to just flip through that book and find what you're looking for. So it's a matter of breaking this thing down. So we've all heard the expression, how do you eat an elephant, right? And the answer is 1 bite at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this elephant of a code book and we're going to tear it down into a bunch of bite-sized pieces for you to understand, know how to access the data, and know if it's relevant to you. So again, back to my 2 key words, and again, you're going to hear me say these repeatedly, context and interpretation. So before we open up the code book, I want to go over those 2 terms with you real quick. First off, let's talk about interpretation. There's a lot of negative connotations associated with interpretation. And the key to that is you've got some person who thinks they're smarter than everybody standing in front of the room and saying, well, one day maybe you will be as smart as me if you're lucky, right? So that's not true at all. Interpretation is really easy to do. And it's not a matter of intellect or intelligence or even experience. It's a matter of simply doing the right thing, okay? So interpretation, I break it down into a real simple formula, and that is read it word for word. That's the key to interpretation, word for word. And then secondly, in what context are we talking about? Meaning, who are they talking about? Is this residential code or is this commercial code? Is this on the roof or is it in the ceiling? Or is it on the floor? Is it in the wall, right? So why in the world would we go to the wall chapter trying to find an answer to a ceiling question? Why would we go to the roof chapter trying to find a question about foundations, right? So again, we're going to break this thing down into chapter, right? So we're going to take the code book, break it down into chapter, and then section, and then subsection, right? And once you understand how to do that, which by the way is very easy, and every class I teach, I tell my students I really don't like it when people tell me something is easy when it's really not. So there's things that may be easy for you that may not be easy for me, but you've done them so many times it's easy. For me, I've never done it before, so it'll be hard for me. So I don't like people telling me something is easy when it's not. So I want you to rest assured this is easy. This is an easy process, but it is a process and you have to follow the steps. And again, the steps are super easy. Read it word for word, pay attention to the context in which it's talking about. So another expression I use whenever I'm teaching code is I tell people truth is only true in context. Truth is only true in context. For example, my name is Wade, but I can't call everybody Wade because not everybody is named Wade. I am, that's true in this context, but for you, whatever your name is, that's true in your context, but not true in every context, right? So again, just simple, silly example of how truth is only true in context. So if I take that out of context, then it's no longer true. So again, we're going to read the code word for word, not your opinion and not my opinion, but specifically what the code says word for word. And then where does it say it? Who are they talking to? What application is this, right? When are we doing this, right? So some of you have been taught the 5 W's, right? Who, what, when, where, and why. So those are kind of the questions you want to ask yourself when you're reading the code. Who is this for? When am I doing this? What's the purpose? Why am I here, right? How did I get here, right? So understanding that really is the key to understanding the entire code book. And again, my opinion is all of us have the ability to read and interpret the code. Now, I'm going to give you a statement that I give in class, and this kind of freaks people out, but you should be able to answer a code question with 100% accuracy 100% of the time. You should be able to be 100% accurate 100% of the time in the code because they're asking you a question about one piece of truth. What is the minimum slope of the roof when installing asphalt shingles, right? So again, your context there is asphalt shingles on the roof. So we're going to go to the roof chapter. We're going to find the roof covering section, and then we're going to find asphalt shingles within that section, and then we're going to find slope within the asphalt shingle section. So now we have found the slope of asphalt shingles on the roof, and that'll be the answer every time for that question. Make sense? And then once you understand that question, you could also give me the slope of mineral surface roll roofing on the roof, or clay roof tile, or asphalt shingles on the roof, or clay hot mop, or bituthane, or clay and concrete tile, or metal roof panels, or metal roof shingles, right? All those things would be right there in that same section, but in a different subsection underneath that roof covering section, underneath the roofing chapter, right? So again, we're going to get into all that. I just kind of want to throw that at you right up front, kind of let you have a real simple idea of how this class is going to go. And again, in my opinion, how easy the code is to actually use, okay? So before we start teaching any code, I always like to start with the table of contents. So again, this class is based on the 2018 International Residential Code. The 21 codes are out, but no one has adopted the 21 codes as of this date. It's middle of 21 right now. I don't expect the 21 codes to be adopted for probably another year at the soonest. Probably 18 months more likely. So just be aware 18 is the currently adopted code around most of the country, and the 21 probably won't be adopted until probably the end of 22, first of 23 is generally the cycle that people and states go through. Okay? So again, this is the 2018, starting off with the International Residential Code called the IRC. So you remember, you guys that are doing the combination, the G12, be sure that you have your IRC in front of you, otherwise you're going to start off lost because you have the IBC and the IRC. Okay? Again, IRC, International Residential Code, 2018 edition. First thing we do when we start teaching a code is we want to walk through the table of contents. I call the table of contents, I call it the code from 30,000 feet. Basically, how is the code book laid out? Where am I going to find information? What kind of information is in that chapter? So I want to tell you something that sounds really silly, but I'm going to walk through the table of contents with you to understand how the code is all laid out, right? Again, the code from 30,000 feet, very high level overview of where information would be. But I want you to know that once we go through this table of contents, my hopes are that you will never go back to the table of contents. So again, my hopes are, after going through this table of contents and seeing you the layout of the land, right? My hopes are that you would never ever go back to the table of contents to ever try to find information, because the most effective way to use the IBC and the IRC is the index in the back. So I'll teach you how to use that as well. the problem with the table of contents is you can find information here, but first off, I got to figure out which chapter it is, and then I got to read through every section. And some of these sections, some of these chapters have 20, 30, 40, 50 sections in them. So you have to read through all those to figure out which section it was, even if you're in the right chapter in the table of contents. Where if you were to go to the index, for example, and look up asphalt shingles, that's just a sample of the question I gave you earlier, it's going to say asphalt shingles refer to 1507.2, right? So 1507 is requirements for roof covering. Chapter 15 is roof assemblies. 1507 requirements for roof covering. 1507.2 is asphalt shingles. Very simple, right? So again, that's why the index in the back is going to be so much better. If I want to put clay roof tile on the roof, then we go to the index and look up clay roof tile, and that's going to send me straight to that section, 1507.3, clay and concrete tile. So again, that's how the code is laid out, and that's how easy the code is to use. Okay, so let's walk through the table of contents. What I want you to do is open up your code book with me to your table of contents, beginning on Roman numeral page 17, XVI there. Table of contents, IRC. Chapter 1, scope and administration. So basically the scope is what scope the code covers, right? What kind of information's in there. And then more so, almost all of chapter 1 is administration. So I define administration as any dealings you're going to have with an inspector. What about permits? What about inspections? What about time frames? What about penalties? What about when can the inspector condemn a property? How much authority does the inspector have to get on the job? That kind of thing. That's all chapter 1 administration. Chapter 2 definitions. This is the glossary of the code book. No code book has a glossary. Every code has a chapter called definitions. IBC and IRC both are chapter 2 definitions. So this would be where I would go for a couple of reasons. First off, if I'm reading something in the code and it says built-up roof, when installing a built-up roof, if I'm not sure what a built-up roof is, I can go back to chapter 2 and look up built-up roof or built-up roofing, and it'll help me understand what that is. One of the purposes of chapter 2 definitions is to make sure that we're all on the same level of communication, right? So again, I relate chapter 2 definitions to, I grew up in Texas, so in Texas, you would call a cold drink, you would call it a Coke, for example. If I were to say, hey, do you want a Coke? And you said yes, then I would say, what kind of Coke would you like? Would you like a Coke or a Dr. Pepper or a Sprite or a Diet Coke? So again, those are all Cokes, but in some parts of the world, they're called sodas. In some parts of the world, they're called pop or fizzy or whatever, right? So again, just terminology. So again, that's the purpose of chapter 2 in the code book, is to be sure we're all using the same terminology, because there's a lot of terms that we use in the industry incorrectly that we think are synonymous with something else they're really not. So again, that's part of chapter 2. Now, for the purposes of this exam, the way you would, the reason you would use chapter 2 is if they were to say, what's a built-up roof? Or which of the following would be considered natural decay resistant type of wood, right? So you go to natural durable wood and look for decay resistant and see what that definition was. Or they might say all of the following woods are natural decay resistant except for what, right? So you could go to the definition, chapter 2, natural decay resistant. Yes, 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 and this one's not, so that'd be your answer. Which one's not a type of natural durable wood or decay resistant wood or whatever that question would be. That's how you would use chapter 2 definitions. Or if they said, what's a fire block? So anytime they ask you what is something, then that's going to be a chapter 2 question, because that's the definition they're looking for, right? Chapter 3 is building planning. Now, the way I describe chapter 3 in the IRC specifically, this is not true of the IBC when we get there, but the IRC specifically, I call chapter 3 the junk drawer of the code book. All of us have a junk drawer at home, right? Some of us have multiple junk drawers. Some of us have a junk garage, whatever. But your junk drawer, what kind of stuff gets put in the junk drawer? And the answer in my house is anything that doesn't have a designated place to go goes in the junk drawer, right? So I've got a toolbox and my regular screwdrivers go right here and my Phillips screwdrivers go right there, but I've got a junk drawer on my toolbox for all the things that I don't use very often, a feeler gauge and a box cutter and a, whatever, all those things, special Torx wrench that I've only used once, whatever, that'll all go in that junk drawer because I don't have a designated place for it. So chapter 3 of the IRC, I want you to think of it as the junk drawer of the code book. So if this question we're asking or this information we're looking for doesn't specifically fit in a designated chapter, for example, the roofing chapter we've already been talking about this morning. So if it's not a roofing question, then if they're asking a general rule about, what is the compressive value of tile, then maybe that's more a chapter 3 question because we don't know what we're using that tile for, right? So anyway, we'll get into chapter 3. So I want you to notice we're just going to walk through a couple of the sections in chapter 3. But I want you to notice, for example, look at section 308, glazing. Now, glazing is glass or windows or something like that. But then let's jump to 310, emergency escape and rescue, and then 311, means of egress. You see how diverse this chapter is. So one's going to tell me how big my windows have to be to allow natural light in and how much those windows have to open to provide natural ventilation, right? That's actually going to fall under section 303, light, ventilation, and heating. And then 308, glazing, that's going to tell me about the skylights on the roof or when a piece of glass would be considered a hazardous location for glass, shower doors, that kind of thing, right? What kind of glass do those have to be? But again, 310, emergency escape and rescue, that is somebody either escaping out of the building, for example, that's on fire, or being rescued out of a burning building. That's section 310. How big do those openings have to be to get somebody out in that event? 311 is means of egress. That's how you and I left our house this morning. So when I left the house, I left through a 311, means of egress. I did not live through a 310 because I was not trying to escape from my house this morning. I safely left my home that was not on fire, so I left through a 311 as opposed to a 310. So again, just trying to give you an idea of these sections, how they lay out. But I just picked a few in here. 303, light, ventilation, and heating. 308, glazing. 310, emergency escape and rescue. And 311, means of egress, just to show you how diverse this chapter is. So it's not a specific chapter about this. Also pay attention to the name of chapter 3. Chapter 3 is building planning, right? What's not part of building planning? Do you agree? The name is so broad, it's a big junk drawer that we could dump a lot of stuff in. So we're going to spend some time in chapter 3. Chapter 4, foundations. Now I want you to see the immediate change here. Do you agree the only thing I'm going to find in chapter 4 is something about foundations? Make sense? So how deep is the foundation? How thick is the foundation? How much wider should the spread footing be than the foundation sitting on top of that footing, right? So footings and foundations and the slope of the grade and how much can the top of the footing slope and how much can the bottom of the footing slope, and those are the kinds of things we're going to find in chapter 4. Chapter 5, floors. Now again, notice how specific. Do you agree if you don't have a floor question, don't go to chapter 5? Now let's just stop here for a second. We've talked about 5 chapters so far. Chapter 1, administration. Chapter 2, definitions. Chapter 3, building planning, the junk drawer of the code book. Chapter 4, foundations, and chapter 5, floors. So let's just stop here for a second and let's assume this is all there is to the code, which there's 13 chapters in the IRC. We're going to talk about each one of those, but let's just talk about these 5 for a second. Do you see how quickly I can eliminate 4 of those if I have a question about the floor? Now again, the floor is going to be a concrete floor or a wood floor or a masonry floor, and those are all going to be subsections within that chapter, right? There'll be sections within that chapter. So section 302 is wood floor framing, right? So if I had a question about a wood floor, now 302 wood floor framing is going to talk about the floor joist. It's going to teach me how to notch and bore the floor joists, right? But there's a section in chapter 3 for concrete, right? So section 506 is concrete floors, right? So 506 is concrete floors. So do you agree if I want to know what's the minimum thickness of a concrete floor on the ground, do you agree I'm going to go to section 506 to find that? So 2 things I want you to notice. Do you notice we're in chapter 5, floors, because I got a question about the floor, and then 501, 502, 503, 504, 506, concrete, that's where I'm going to find the concrete floors. Again, if I've got a question about notching a floor joist or notching or boring a floor joist, then I would go back to the wood section, which is section 302, right? So, 502. So 502 is wood floor framing, okay? So again, I want to stop here for a second also and tell you that I can quote a lot of these section numbers because I've taught the code for almost 30 years. I do not expect that of you, nor do I desire that for you. I don't want you to be able to quote these sections like I can. You know, after you've been teaching the code for 30 years, then you can probably spout some of the information off like I do, but you don't need that. I tell people, if you can take the tip of your finger and put it in your book and find what the book says about the minimum thickness of a concrete floor slab being 3.5 inches thick, then you know everything I know about that. You don't have to memorize it. You don't have to know that. The key is you just need to know how to find it. Okay? I have people ask me all the time, Wade, how do I get as good in the code book as you? And I simply tell them, do it for 30 years. Then you'll be as good as me. Right? This is not a pride or an ego thing. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else. I've just had a lot more experience than you guys have, most of you. So based on that, again, the code is not hard to understand. The code is not hard to interpret. You don't have to memorize chapters. You don't have to memorize sections or subsections. Just be able to find the information. Okay? So moving on, chapter 5, floors. Chapter 6 is wall construction. So also notice when you get to chapters 4 through 9, it's kind of ground up construction. So chapter 4 is foundations. Chapter 5 is the floors. Chapter 6 is the walls. Chapter 7 is the wall covering. Anything you can imagine to cover the walls, inside or outside. Lath and plaster, brick, stucco, sheetrock, wallpaper, right? So the question is, are we covering the inside or the outside? That's chapter 7. Chapter 8 is the roof ceiling assembly. That is not the roof and is not the ceiling. You and I would call that the attic. That's above the ceiling and below the roof. That's the roof ceiling assembly. Notice your hyphen there on chapter 8. And then chapter 9, roof assemblies. Now we're up on the roof. So again, that's the chapter we were talking about where if I want to know what the minimum slope of the roof is when putting asphalt shingles on the roof, that's obviously going to be a chapter 9, roof assemblies. And then look at section 905, requirements for roof cover, right? Requirements for roof cover. If you caught me on that, I quoted 1507 before. That's chapter 15 of the IBC. We'll talk about that when we get to the IBC. Information I told you is exactly the same, but here we're going to find it in chapter 9, roof assemblies. IBC, we're going to find it in chapter 15, roof assemblies. So 905 is requirements for roof coverings. 905.2 is asphalt shingles. 905.2.2 is slope. That's a minimum slope of the roof and installing asphalt shingles, right? So sorry for that misquote there. I was actually, when I started talking to you earlier about chapter 15, that was of the IBC. So we'll talk about that later. So chapter 10, chimneys and fireplaces, right? So again, chapter 9, roof assemblies. So now we're at the roof. So that's kind of 4 through 9, ground up construction. And then the rest of the chapters are just kind of added on data. So chapter 10, chimneys and fireplaces. But again, if you had a question about how do you build a chimney, or how big does the hearth have to be, or how far does the hearth have to extend beyond the sides of the fireplace, or how far in front of the fireplace, obviously you're going to find all that in chapter 10, chimneys and fireplaces, right? Real simple. So again, let me stop here. We're 5 more chapters deep. Do you see how we could make 9 of these chapters go away right away? For example, if I had a question about chimneys and fireplaces, then obviously chapters 1 through 9 don't matter at all. I'm going to go straight to chapter 10, chimneys and fireplaces. Okay? So based on that, code is really easy to use. We're just breaking it down into chapters and then into sections and then into subsections, which makes this a very easy used and managed tool. Okay? So just so you know, that's the majority of what you're going to need out of the IRC is chapters 1 through 10. So real quickly, chapter 11, energy efficiency. This would be talking about insulation and building envelopes and insulation in the attic and the walls. Chapter 12, mechanical administration. Notice that chapter is only 2 pages long, so there's just not that much stuff in there. Chapter 13, general mechanical, special requirements, right? So again, it just goes on from there. One more chapter I want to talk to you about is the index, right? So I call the index, I call it the code for dummies, right? I don't mean anything offensively by that when I say it, but there's all these books for dummies out there, right? Fly fishing for dummies or reloading for dummies. That's kind of a scary book. But anyway, there's all these books for dummies out there, so it kind of takes you from 0 up to an understanding of how to use it. So I call the index, I call it the code for dummies. So if you were to ask me a question that I didn't know the answer to, I would immediately take you to the index. We'd immediately go to the back of the book, which is the index is located in the very back of the book, and I'd go there. For example, if you said, hey Wade, I need to put asphalt shingles on the roof, what's the minimum slope of the roof? If I didn't know that already, again, I'd go to the index in the back, look up asphalt shingles. It's going to say refer to section 905.2, asphalt shingles. So again, real quick, let's talk about that. 905.2, so that's a 905, that's a 3-digit reference, 905. So what I need you to understand is the last two numbers are always the section. For example, that is section 05. In this case, it's a 3-digit reference, so the first one is the chapter, last two are the section. Chapter 9, section 05. Now, I'm going to change this. Let's call it chapter 19, for example. That's a 4-digit reference. Now the first two are the chapter because the last two are still and always the section. So 905, chapter 9, section 05. I exaggerate the 05 because I want you to realize it is for sure a 2-digit reference. Chapter 9, section 05. If it was 1905, it'd be chapter 19, section 05. So that's what the index is going to tell you. For example, it's not going to tell you refer to page 430. It's going to say refer to section 905, or asphalt shingles specifically would say refer to 905.2. Okay? So again, that's how we're going to use the code. Again, all I need you to know about that is how to read the number. 3-digit reference, 905, chapter 9, section 05. 4-digit reference, 1905, chapter 19, section 05. And then, of course, 905.1 or 905.2 or 905.3, that just will follow right along. Okay? Let's jump into Chapter 1, Administration. Chapter 1, Administration, we're going to start on page 3. So middle right-hand column there, section 105, Permits. Now, again, stop. So this is the mistake a lot of people make, is they don't pay attention to their context as they're going through the code. But do you agree, section 105, first off, that means chapter 1, section 05, is on permitting. Do you agree the only thing you're going to learn in section 105 is only about permitting? Very simple. So drop right down below there, 105.2, work exempt from permitting. So again, do you know exactly what you're going to find in this section? So I use an expression, if you don't need it, don't read it, right? So if you don't need this information, don't read this information, right? If it's not relevant to you, if it's not something you need, then don't waste your time going through it. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second because this is one of the single largest mistakes people make in the code. I mentioned this in the beginning of this class. People flip through the code books with their fingers crossed, hoping that they're going to find what they're looking for. But do you agree if I read section 105, permits, when I'm trying to find out what the minimum slope of the roof is when installing asphalt shingles, there's no way in the world I'm going to find it. And then I've wasted time reading this because it's not relevant, right? My context is not correct. And then secondly, I'm going to get frustrated because I'm going to read for 400 pages before I even get to the roofing chapter, and I'm going to be burnt out by the time I get there, and I'm going to give up, right? So again, do you see how that roofing question, just using that as an example, could be anything. But do you agree, chapter 9, roof assemblies, we'd skip chapters 1 through 8, go straight to chapter 9. And then we'd look and see what section 901 and 902 and 903 was, and see which one of those we needed to look in to find something about the roof, right? So again, 105 permit, if this is what you're looking for, you're in the right spot. 105.2, work exempt from permit. If this is what you're looking for, you're in the right spot. And if it's not, stop reading. If it's not what you're looking for, stop reading. Now we're going to jump to the next page, electrical. So do you agree 105 is permitting, 105.2 work exempt from permitting. Now we're underneath 105.2 for electrical. So this is electrical work exempt from permitting. You see how you know exactly what you're going to learn before you read it. Drop down to number 5. There's 5 things there, but number 5 down there says minor repair work, including the replacement of lamps or connections of approved portable electrical equipment to approved permanently installed receptacles. So with that, that is your minor repair work, right? So again, do you agree minor repair work in regard to electrical work exempt from permitting under the permit section, right? Perfect context, perfect location, right? That's how you use the code book. So again, let me stop here for a second and ask you, based on what we just learned, I want you to know the code is written 100% like this all the way through the code, right? So now we have 500 more pages to go through, exactly like we went through this one. But do you see how we've taken the code, first off, knocked it just down to chapter 1, administration, just down to section 05, permitting, and just down to the electrical section under exempt from permitting, 105.2, And then under exempt from permitting, 105.2, do you want to know about mechanical or building or electrical work exempt from permitting? So again, this is how easy the code is. So when I started the class off by telling you the code is easy, this is exactly what I mean. This is how easy the code is. So jokingly, I could tell you, class dismissed. Now you know how to use the code book, right? Because if I can find this in the code, why couldn't I find anything else in the code? Because the whole code book is written exactly like this, okay? Let's jump to the right-hand column there, bottom right. Notice we got 105.3 applications for permits. Now let's stop, pay attention to your context. We're still in Chapter 1, Administration. We're in Section 05, Permitting, 105.3. Now this is application for a permit. So do you agree, if the work was exempt from permitting, I don't need to know anything about applying for a permit? Does that make sense? If I need to know something about applying for a permit, then obviously my work was not exempt from permitting, so that's how I got here and why I'm here. But again, do you agree this application for a permit should be under the permitting section, right? Section 105, permits. So again, code is very well organized, very well laid out. Pay attention to your context. If you don't need it, don't read it. Let's talk about an application for a permit. So again, I could ask you who has to apply, when do they have to apply, how much time do they have to apply. All that's going to be in this section 105.3, right? So it says to obtain a permit, the applicant shall first file an application. Okay, well, again, these test questions on the exam, folks, are words just like this. Sentences just like this. They've taken out of the code book word for word, and they'll leave words out. For example, this says to obtain a permit, the applicant shall first file an application. So the question could simply say, to obtain a permit, what must you do first? And the answer is, the applicant shall first file an application, right? So again, when we hear questions like that, the first thing we think is, well, that's a stupid question. Obviously, got to apply for a permit. But again, do you agree this test is not about what you know? This test is about what can you find in the code. These code exams are 100% around the country, all of them are 100% about your ability to find an answer in a book. So, quick side note here, we know people who have licenses that we look at them and go, wow, I don't know how in the world that guy got a license. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing. But if they can pass an exam like this, that's why they got a license. We also know other people who maybe have failed the exam multiple times, and we look at that and go, how in the world has this guy failed the test? This is the best builder I've ever seen. But again, there's a difference in knowing our trades, which is what you know how to do the work out in the trade. And then there's a difference between that and answering a test question, because again, the average person would have answered this and go, well, I don't know, you got to do this and this, and you probably got to do that, you probably got to pay a fee and whatever. But again, do you see how this statement right here in the book says the first thing you have to do is you have to apply, right? So again, the question was, to obtain a permit, what must the applicant do first, right? And again, they might say write a check, apply, make application, submit paperwork, whatever, right? Submit a copy of the plans. Because when you and I look at that, go, well, I'm going to have to pay a fee, I'm going to have to fill out an application, I'm going to have a copy of the plans. But do you see how we wouldn't know which one was first necessarily, right? In my mind, I'd write the check before I submitted the application, right? That's justifiable in my mind, but that's not what the book says. The book says to obtain a permit, the applicant shall first file an application. And then it goes on to say, therefore, in writing on a form furnished by the Department of Building Safety for the purpose, right? For that purpose. And then he says, such application shall, and then down below there it gives you a list of information that's required on the application. So again, do you see how simple these questions are to answer? Remember, guys and gals, they're never asking your opinion. They're never asking what would you do. They're never asking what have you done. They're saying, what does the book say we're supposed to do? Very simple. Let's jump over to page 7. Page 7, very top left-hand corner, we've got section 107, temporary structures and uses. So, again, maybe you say, wait, I don't know what kind of information is in here. I don't either, but do we know what the section's about? The whole section's going to be about something temporary structures and temporary uses, right? So when can we temporarily use something, or how long is temporary, or whatever. Those are the kind of things we're going to learn in here. And again, let me say, do you agree if you're not looking for something about a temporary structure or the temporary use of a structure, then do you agree you shouldn't be reading this anyway? Okay. Let's take a look at number 1, general. So general, everything having to do with temporary structures and uses. It says the building official is authorized to issue a permit for a temporary structure and temporary uses. Such permit shall be limited as to the time of service, but shall not be permitted for more than 180 days. So, again, do you see, I've been doing this so long, I see 2 or 3 test questions in there that they could ask, right? For example, the question could simply be, who is authorized to issue a permit for a temporary structure? Well, that'd be the building official, right? What kind of temporary permits is a building official authorized to issue? Well, he's authorized to issue a permit for temporary structures and for temporary uses, right? How long is a temporary use structure permit valid for? Well, it says such permit shall be limited as time of service, but shall not be permitted to be more than 180 days. So again, the way they'll ask that last part of that question is, what's the maximum length of a temporary permit, right? Or a permit for temporary use or temporary structure, that'd be 180 days maximum, right? So after that 180 days, permit's going to expire. I can either go apply for another one or move on from there, right? So one more, chapter 1, page 9. Chapter 1, page 9. Top left, we've got section 112, Board of Appeals. Now again, do you see how you're going to get tired of hearing me say this, stop, why are we here, what are we doing? But when I say stop, I mean it, because I'm less concerned about you getting this qualification section highlighted. I'm more concerned about you understanding why we're here. So do you agree section 112 is about Board of Appeals? So do you agree we're going to learn something about appeals? Who's on the board? Maybe how long can you be on the board? In this case, .3 qualifications. What's the qualification to be on the Board of Appeals? Don't you think that's probably what we're going to learn in there, right? Who's qualified to be on the Board of Appeals, right? So underneath qualifications there, section R112.3, the Board of Appeals shall consist of members who are qualified by experience and training to pass judgment on matters pertaining to building construction and are not employees of the jurisdiction. So the jurisdiction, the authority having jurisdiction, the city, the county, the state, they're the ones that are going to do the permitting and all that. But notice the Board of Appeals, we want somebody who's not an employee of that jurisdiction, because now my boss failed your inspection and I work for the city and now I'm on the Board of Appeals. Well, I'm not going to go against my boss because I know I'll get in trouble. So they want it to be somebody who is not an employee of the jurisdiction. And again, they use that term jurisdiction because whether that's the city jurisdiction that you pull the permit in, the county jurisdiction that you pull the permit in, or the state jurisdiction that you pull the permit in, right? That's why they use generic terms like that, jurisdiction. We don't know where you are, city, county, state levels, okay? So again, chapter 1, understanding how to use chapter 1, that whole philosophy is going to flow all the way through the code book exactly the same way as it has through chapter 1. We're just going to continue on for several chapters, learning how to use, how to read, and how to interpret the code. Let's jump into chapter 2, definitions. Chapter 2, definitions. Chapter 2, definitions starts off on page 11. I want you to jump over to page 21 for me. So, top right, page 21, we've got natural durable wood. So we kind of mentioned this earlier. What is natural durable wood? So again, that could be a test question. What is considered natural durable wood? Well, the definition here, remember what I told you, if they ask you what is it, right? That's a definition, so go to chapter 2. So what is natural durable wood? If that was the question, the answer would be the heartwood of the following species, with the exception that an occasional piece with corner sapwood is permitted if 90% or more, whatever. So that's your definition. By the way, do you agree down below there we have 2 sub-definitions, decay-resistant natural durable wood, and then termite-resistant natural durable wood, right? So again, if they were to ask you something about decay resistance, they would say, there's 2 ways they could ask this. Their favorite way to ask this is, all of the following are decay-resistant natural durable woods except for what? All of the following are decay-resistant natural durable woods except for what? Now, do you notice under decay-resistant it says redwood, cedar, black locust, and then black walnut. So do you agree those are, right? And what they'll do is they'll pick 3 of those. For example, redwood, cedar, and black locust, and then they'll give you something else like pine. Now again, I just picked pine. You notice pine's not a choice, right? Redwood, cedar, black locust, and black walnut. Well, pine's not a choice. So pine, I don't want to argue with you here, but pine may not be natural durable wood, or it might be natural durable wood, but it may not be decay resistant, right? So we're not talking about what pine is. We're just saying, hey, pine's not on the list of decay resistant wood, right? So all of the following are types of decay resistant natural durable woods except for what? Redwood, yes. Cedar, yes. Black locust, yes. Pine, again, I just made that up. No, pine wouldn't be, right? So let's step down, still under natural durable wood, step down to termite resistant, right? What if they were to ask you something about that? So all of the natural durable woods are termite resistant except for what? And they'd give you that list. And again, that's their favorite way to ask that. All of the following are except. Now let me change that question. Let's go back to decay resistant real quick. Which of the following is a decay resistant natural durable wood? If that was a test question, then one of your choices would be redwood or cedar or black locust or black walnut. And out of those four, only one of them would be a choice because they said which one is, right? There will not be a question where you have two right answers. In other words, they won't say choice A, redwood, choice B, cedar, because both of those are defined in the code book as decay resistant natural durable wood. So they won't give you that, right? The questions must be defendable, which means if you and I disagree with the question on the exam, the people who administer the exam have to be able to prove why they're right. So do you agree if the answer was redwood, and you said, well, why is redwood the answer? Their answer would be because cedar, black locust, and black walnut were not choices, right? That'd be your answer. It'd be real easy to defend. Book says redwood, it doesn't say whatever else, right? Very simple. And again, you notice these are just straight lookups. So that's an example of a question you may see in Chapter 2, but again, that's also how Chapter 2 works. Let's jump into Chapter 3, Building Planning. Now, generally, when I'm teaching a code book, depends on which state I'm in or depends on what state I'm preparing for, which exam I'm preparing for. But in the IRC, it's very common that I'll spend more time in Chapter 3 alone than I'll spend generally in any other 3 or 4 or 5 chapters put together, right? You just saw how little time we spent in Chapter 2, so I may spend more time in Chapter 3 than I spend in 4, 5, 6, and 7 altogether, right? So again, Chapter 3 is your junk drawer. Remember, a lot of us have big junk drawers because we have a bunch of stuff that doesn't have a specific designated location, so it just goes into the junk drawer. That's what Chapter 3 is. Building planning. So, Chapter 3 starts on page 29. I want you guys to jump over with me to page 57. This is section 302, fire-resistant construction. Now again, I tell you guys, stop. Now, just so you know, to get here, fire-resistant construction is a general requirement or building planning of the IRC. In the IBC, there's a chapter called fire-resistant construction, right? So in that case, the IBC is written very different. We'll get into that when we get into the IBC. But two ways you could get here. First off, Chapter 3, general. We don't know, we're fire-resistant construction, but we don't know where or what or how, right? So those who, what, when, where, why, and how are kind of missing. So that's why we ended up in Chapter 3. They didn't say specifically here, specifically there. So that's why we're in Chapter 3. So to properly use Chapter 3, you should have looked at Section 301, which was general. You look at that and say, okay, well, this is just general stuff. 302 is fire-resistant construction. If this is what you want, that's where you should stop. If not, you should go to 303, light, ventilation, and heating. If that's not it, go to 304 and keep working through those sections until you find the section you need, okay? So, Section 302, fire-resistant construction. And then we're going to jump over to page 58, top left, 302.2, townhomes. Now stop. Do you agree the single only thing we're going to learn in 302.2 is something about townhomes? But we're in section 302, fire-resistant construction. So do you agree we're going to learn something about fire-resistant construction in regard to townhomes? That's why we're here. And then let's go to page 59. Middle left, page 59 says 302.2.4, parapets for townhomes. Now, I really preferred teaching this specific section. I preferred teaching it out of the 09 code because in 09, this 302.2.4 just said parapets. So I would teach it 302.2.4 parapets, for a 302.2, which was townhomes, for a 302, which is fire-resistant construction. Okay? So let's walk through that again. I want you to notice I simply did one thing. I simply took the last number off. 302.2.4 is parapets. Take that last number off, .4. Do you agree we're under the section 302.2? So now, again, I could look at this and say this is parapets for a 302.2. And then I could turn back. What's a 302.2? Oh, that's a townhome. And then, okay, 302.2 is townhome. Take the last number off again, .2. So now we're in 302, fire-resistant construction. So again, do you see how I know immediately what I'm going to learn? Now, I tell people that we've been taught a way our whole lives, and that way is read this information to understand it. Read to understand. I want to teach you guys a new way to use this book. And the new way to use the book is know what you're going to learn before you read it. Let me say that again. Know what you're going to learn before you read it. So do you agree 302.2.4 parapets for townhomes, let's just call it parapets like the 09 code did. So I'm going to learn something about parapets. So take that last number, make it go away, 302.2. That's a townhome, so I'm going to learn something about parapets on a townhome. By the way, if you're not a townhome, this rule doesn't apply to you. 302.2 townhomes, take that last number off, .2, and 302, fire-resistant construction. So again, do you agree? I know exactly what I'm going to learn in this section. Listen, this is important before you read a word of the content. I know exactly what I'm going to learn before I read a word. I know I'm going to learn something about parapets on townhomes for fire-resistant construction. Perfect context. Now that I understand what I'm going to learn, now I can decide, hey, Wade, do you want to know something about parapets for townhomes for fire-resistant construction? If so, I'm in the right spot. If not, leave it alone. Let's not even read it. Very simple. Now again, I keep saying that, but in my opinion, it's every bit as important to know what to throw away and not pay attention to as it is to know what to pay attention to. So again, I can make 99.9% of the code go away just like that because it's all talking about something I'm not trying to find on the test or not trying to find in the code book. This makes my life a lot easier. Okay? So 302.2.4, parapets for townhomes, page 59. It says parapet construction in accordance with section 302.2.5 shall be constructed for townhomes as an extension of exterior walls, of common walls, in accordance with the following. Now, that looks like a typo to me because it says parapet construction in accordance with section 302.2.5. I would look at that and go, hold on, we're in 302.2.4. But if you glance ahead at 302.2.5, that is how to construct parapets. So anyway, so basically it says when you build a parapet, that's what that section tells you. When you build a parapet, it shall be built in accordance with the following. Number one, where the roof surfaces adjacent to the walls or walls are at the same elevation, the parapet shall extend not less than 30 inches above the roof surface. So that means if the roof is the same level all over, and where it hits the parapet wall, the parapet is the portion of the wall that extends above the roof. So where that parapet hits the wall, the parapet shall extend at least 30 inches above the roof. Now again, let me read that to you one more time. Where roof surfaces, plural. So again, we're talking about a townhome. So this is the wall between my townhouse and your townhouse if we're neighbors. So do you agree the roof on one side might be higher than the roof on the other side? So again, notice what it says. The roof surfaces, plural, adjacent to the wall or walls are at the same level. The parapet shall extend not less than 30 inches above the surface of the roof. So roof surfaces, plural. So if they're at the same level, 30 inches above that. By the way, look at number 2. Where roof surface adjacent wall or walls are at different elevations, and the height of the roof is not more than 30 inches above the lower roof, then the parapet shall extend no less than 30 inches above the lower roof, right? So again, that's both under parapets for townhomes, right? This is how I want them built, right? So again, very simple information. So again, a question here could be, what's the minimum height of a parapet for a townhome? Now the question should not say, what's the minimum height of a parapet? Because do you agree if you said, hey Wade, what's the minimum height of a parapet? I would not have come here because 302, fire-resistant construction, by the way, the whole purpose of this parapet between my townhome and yours is if my townhome catches on fire, the whole purpose of the parapet is to try to avoid catching your townhome on fire. So that's why it's under 302. But do you agree if we weren't in a townhome, there's no way I would have ended up with 302.2. So the question would have to say, what's the minimum height of a parapet for a townhome? Now we go to fire resistant construction, townhomes, parapets for townhomes, right? Now one more time, the other way we could find this, we go to the index in the back and look up parapets. Now just so you know, if you looked up parapets, it's probably going to give you a section reference like 315, right? That's going to be the P's in, 215. That's going to be the P's in chapter 2, so it'll probably define what a parapet is. So if you have multiple references in the index, if you don't know what the references are, just check them one at a time. Well, that chapter 2 is the definition of the parapet, so I don't need that. What's the next reference, right? Just work your way through the code there. So let's go to page 62. Middle left, page 62, R302.11, fire blocking. Bottom left there, 302.11.1, fire blocking material. So again, notice we're still in 302, fire resistant construction. 302.11 is fire blocking. So if you want to know something about blocking of fire in regard to fire resistant construction, then you're in the right spot. And then down below that, materials.1, so it's either materials for fire blocking, for fire resistant construction, right? Very simple. So it says, except as provided in section R302.11, item 4, fire blocking shall consist of the following materials. Now, I want to eliminate some information right away. It says, except as provided in section R302.11. So first off, we know what 302.11 is right above us, fire blocking. It says, except for up there, item number 4, except for that one exception, then it says fire blocking shall consist of the following materials, right? So 2-inch nominal lumber. So again, question on the exam could be, which of the following would be considered fire blocking, acceptable fire blocking materials, right? One choice would be 2-inch nominal lumber, right? Nominal is the name we give it. It's not actually a 2x, but it's 2x nominal, right? That's the name. And then it goes on 2 through 8, right? So again, it could be any of those. So if your choice on the test wasn't 2-inch nominal lumber, you'd look at number 2 and number 3 and number 4 until one of those came up, right? Let's go right-hand column, bottom right, 302.12, draft stopping. By the way, if you say, Wade, what's a fire block? What's a draft stop? I'd say go back to chapter 2 and look them up. Fire block blocks fire, draft stop drafts, but there's an extended definition in chapter 2 for those. So bottom right, 302.12, draft stopping. So that tells you this is where draft stopping is required in combustible construction, right? Unusable space, whatever. Drop down below there, 302.12.1 materials. Now stop. Do you agree? I'm going to learn something about the materials I can use for now draft stopping that, by the way, might be different than fire blocking under 302.11. Materials. Draft stopping materials shall not be less than 1/2-inch gypsum board, comma, 3/8 inch wood structural panel or other approved materials adequately supported. So again, I know what 1/2-inch gypsum board is. I know what 3/8 wood structural panel is. I don't know what other approved material is. So they'll never ask you a question about approved materials. They'll say, for example, which of the following materials are approved for draft stopping? And they'll only give you the choice of 1/2-inch gypsum board or only the choice of 3/8 wood structural panel. Now, I said I know what wood structural panel is. You may or may not know. So wood structural panel is the generic definition they give for plywood, particle board, OSB. All of those fall under that definition of wood structural panel. Okay? Plywood, particle board, OSB. You'll never see those terms in the code. You'll always see this one term, wood structural panels. Let's jump to page 63. Bottom left, page 63, section 303, light, ventilation, and heating. Again, you know exactly what you're going to learn in here. 303.1, habitable rooms. Stop. So I'm going to learn something about light or heating or ventilation in a habitable room. It says, habitable room shall have an aggregate glazing area of not less than 8% of the floor area of such room. So the glazings, right? So I need to have natural light. Now again, that could be a window, that could be a skylight, but it says habitable rooms, right? So if you're not a habitable room, this rule does not apply to you. If you don't know what a habitable room is, you go back to chapter 2, look up definition of habitable room. Habitable room shall have an aggregate glazing. Aggregate just means total, cumulative, sum, glazing area of not less than 8% of the floor of such room. So however big this room is, to provide natural light, I have to have 8% opening to the outside. Skylights, windows, whatever, for natural light. Middle right, 303.3, bathrooms. This is my favorite question I'm going to ask you today, and that is, what am I doing in the bathroom? I love asking that question because when I'm teaching these classes live, everybody looks at me with a weird look and they go, hey, Wade, we don't want to talk about what you're doing in the bathroom. Let me ask the question again. What am I doing in the bathroom? And the answer is I'm 303ing in the bathroom. I'm 303 in the bathroom. So look back your bottom left. What is 303? So do you agree 303 is light, ventilation, and heating? So 303.3 bathrooms. So I'm either lighting the bathroom, or I'm ventilating the bathroom, or I'm heating the bathroom, right? So when I say, what am I doing in the bathroom? Your answer should be either lighting, ventilating, or heating, because we're into that whole section there. And then it says bathrooms. Bathrooms, water closet compartments, and other similar areas shall be provided with an aggregate glazing area and windows of not less than 3 square feet, 1/2 of which must be openable. Now, notice that tells me two things. That tells me that I've got to have 3 square feet for natural light. Now, let me read that to you again. Bathrooms, water closet compartments, other similar rooms shall be provided with an aggregate glazing area and windows not less than 3 square feet. So again, it didn't say anything about an openable area. It just said, hey, I need 3 square feet of glazing. So do you agree that's 3 square feet of light? Now keep reading. It says 1/2 of which must be openable. In many states, they'll ask a question here, what's the minimum square foot of ventilation in the bathroom? And 80% of the people get that wrong because they say 3 square feet. Well, if you've got a window in your house that doesn't open, or almost every window in your house only opens halfway, if you have a standard double hung window, then do you agree if I've got a standard double hung window, top pane, bottom pane slides over the top pane, whatever, do you agree that thing's only going to have half openable to the outdoors? Do you agree I'm going to get light out of the top and bottom? By the way, 4% for natural light, 4% for natural vent, right? So I'm going to get light out of both, so 4 and 4 is 8. I'm going to get light out of both, but I'm only going to open halfway, gives me 4% for natural ventilation, right? So that's that habitable room in the bottom left. But in a bathroom specifically, they say 3 square feet of glazing, and then they say 1/2 of which must be openable. That's 1.5 square feet for ventilation in the bathroom, right? Section 304, minimum room areas. So again, 303, light, ventilation, and heating. Now we're in 304, minimum room areas. And again, if that's what we want, we're in the right spot. If not, let's go on to 305 or 306, right? So 304.1, minimum areas. Habitable room shall have a floor area of not less than 70 square feet. So again, a question like this on the exam would simply appear, what's the minimum square footage of a habitable room? So minimum room areas, here we are. Now again, 304 minimum room areas in this junk drawer, chapter 3. So again, there's not a lot of logic of why that's specifically in this chapter, other than the fact that minimum room areas doesn't really pertain to the footing or the walls or the floors or the ceilings, right? It doesn't pertain to much else. That's why they put it in chapter 3. Down below that, 304.2, minimum dimensions. Habitable rooms shall be not less than 7 feet in any horizontal dimension, right? So measuring horizontally, right? That'd be your length or width. So minimum width of a habitable room should not be less than 7 feet, right? So again, same type of question. What's the minimum width of a habitable room? Now, again, they would not say what's the minimum width of a room, right? Because there's no such thing. But what's the minimum width of a habitable room? What's the minimum square footage of a habitable room, right? Minimum 70 square feet, minimum 7 feet in horizontal dimension. Now, one more thing I want to address with you, since we're talking about these two things, the average person would look at this as a contradiction in the code. And they're saying, well, hold on, if dot 2 says you got to be a minimum room of 7 feet in any horizontal dimension, that'd be 7 times 7, that'd be 49 square feet. And then it says, 304.1, it says a habitable room shall be not less than 70 square feet. So again, that's not a contradiction. What it's saying is you can never be less than 7 feet in any horizontal dimension. And also, by the way, I want 70 square feet of any habitable room. So what that means is we'll let you go 7 feet this way, but you're going to have to be 10 feet the other way to give you your 70. Or we'll let you go 7 feet this way, but you better be 10 feet the other way because we want at least 70 square feet. Okay? So again, not a contradiction, two separate rules, right? maximum speed limit is 75 and the minimum speed limit is 45, right? That's not a contradiction. Those are two separate rules. Down below that, section 305, ceiling heights. Again, we know exactly what we're going to learn. 305.1, minimum height. Now we know exactly what we're going to learn. This is the minimum ceiling height, right? Habitable space. Again, if you're not a habitable space, we're not talking to you. Hallways and portions of basements containing these spaces shall have a ceiling height of not less than 7 feet. So again, ceiling height, they've got to be at least 7 feet. By the way, it goes on to say bathrooms, toilet rooms, laundry rooms shall have a ceiling height of not less than 6'8". So again, do you see how they could ask that question both ways? What's the minimum ceiling height of a habitable room? Notice they didn't say anything about a bathroom or a toilet room or a laundry room. The answer would be 7 feet. If they wanted that 6'8", they would say, what's the minimum width of a habitable, they don't really consider toilet rooms habitable specifically. So what would be the minimum ceiling height of a bathroom or a toilet room or a laundry room, right? So anyway, they would have to ask that specifically if they wanted that distinction. Now listen, 6'8" and 7 feet will probably both be choices on the test. So again, the rule is the rule unless they ask for the exception. Let me say that again. The rule is the rule unless they ask for the exception. So in this case, the rule is 7 feet ceiling heights. And the exception is, except for bathrooms, except for toilet rooms, except for laundry rooms, those can be 6'8". So if they want that answer to be 6'8", they have to ask you one of those three things. What's the minimum ceiling height of a bathroom, or minimum ceiling height of a toilet room, or minimum ceiling height of a laundry room? Those would be 6'8". But again, the rule is ceiling heights have to be at least 7 feet. So that's the general rule. So if they say, what's the minimum ceiling height of a habitable room or a habitable space? Again, that bathroom, toilet room, laundry room are not habitable rooms. That's why they're distinguished separately there. Let's go to page 65. Page 65, middle left, section 307, toilets, bath, and shower spaces. Now again, I want to show you, we just jumped from section 305 into section 307. So if you were using the code book yourself, if 305 wasn't what you were looking for, you would never jump to 307. You would say, what's a 306? Well, that's sanitation. That's not what I'm looking for. What's a 307? Toilets, bath, and shower spaces. Okay, that's what I'm looking for, right? So it's okay for me to drag you across a section, or it's okay for me to skip a couple of sections, because this is the next thing I want you to know. But if you were using the code book yourself, you would look at every section as you went by. Do I need this? Yes or no? Do I need this? Yes or no? Do I need this? Yes or no? In other words, do I need 304? Yes or no? Do I need 305? Yes or no? Do I need 306? Yes or no? Do I need 307? This is the one I'm looking for. Okay? So section 307, toilet, bath, and shower spaces. So again, do you see we automatically know what we're going to learn here? Before we read a word, if I'm paying attention to my context, I know exactly what I'm going to learn. I don't know what about a toilet. I don't know what about a bath. I don't know what about a shower, but I'm going to learn something about those. And then down below there, space required, and then bathtub and shower spaces. So again, when it says bathtub and shower spaces, again, we're specifically talking about that. But again, I want to be clear. I don't know exactly what they're going to tell me, but I know I'm going to learn something about bathtubs and shower spaces. Bathtub and shower floors and walls above bathtubs with installed shower heads and in shower compartments shall be finished with a non-absorbent surface. Such wall surface shall extend to a height of not less than 6 feet above the floor. So again, your shower has to be finished at least 6 feet above the floor, right? So that's your minimum height. You can finish your shower as far as you want, but you can never finish it less than 6 feet, right, above the floor. Let's go to page 71. On page 71, we've got middle left there, section 311, means of egress. Bottom right, stairways. Let's jump to the next page, 311.7.8, handrails. Now I did that real fast on purpose because again, you should know what we're doing by now. So 311 was means of egress, 311.7 was stairways, and 311.7.8 is handrails. So again, even as quickly as I went through those, that's a handrail for a stairway for egress. It's not every stairway, it's an egress stairway, right? So again, I'll back up intentionally, but I want to show you why I went through those so quickly. So 311 means of egress, that's what we're going to learn. And then .1, .2, .3, so these are egress doors, these are egress landings, these are egress floors, and now 311.7 is an egress stairway, because we're still 311, so we're still egress. 311.7 stairways. and then the width of the stairway and the headroom in the stairway and whatever. So the next thing we're looking for is what's the minimum height of the headroom in the stairway. So, not headroom, sorry, but handrails. So handrails, 311.7.8, handrails, height. So this is the height of the handrail for stairways for egress. Now, let me repeat that again. This is going to sound really crazy, but I want you to listen. That's a 311.7.8.1 for a 311.7.8 for a 311.7 into 311, right? So I said it the same way all three times. It's the height of handrails for stairways for egress, right? So I want to teach you guys how to read by the numbers. So pay attention to that section number. That way you know exactly where you are. Because for example, if you were to just call me on the phone and say, hey Wade, what is 311.7.8.1 talking about? Well, first off, I'd ask you, are we IRC or IBC? Now, one thing I have not taught you yet is notice that letter in front of 311.7.8.1, that R. Anytime there's a letter indication in front of the chapter, section, subsection numbers, that refers to the International Residential Code. So now R for residential, but you're also going to see, remember we talked about in the table of contents, electrical and mechanical, so there'd be an E and an M in front of those chapter numbers. But anytime you see that letter, so if you said R 311.78, that would tell me IRC. So 311.7.8 means exactly the same thing, but in the IBC. So again, if you see a letter reference, that's indicating before the chapter, that's indicating IRC. If there's no letter reference, that's IBC. So anyway, if you were to call me up and say, hey, Wade, I'm having trouble understanding what R 311.7.8.1 is trying to tell me. Well, I would say, okay, well, that's the height. But before I went into anything, I would say, see, that's the height of, take the last number, make it go away, 311.7.8, handrail. So that's the height of a handrail. But it's not all handrails. It's only in 311.7, whatever that is. In this case, happens to be stairways. So it's the height of a handrail for a stairway, but not all stairways because that's in section 311. So that's egress. So emergency escape and rescue, excuse me. So 311 is emergency escape and rescue. Sorry, that's not correct. 311 is means of egress. 311.7 is stairways. 311.7.8 is handrails. And then 8.1 is height. Height of handrails for stairways for egress. Okay? So a handrail height, measure vertically from the slope plane adjoining the treads and nose, the finished surface or ramp slope shall be not less than 34 inches and not more than 38 inches. So again, the minimum height of a handrail is 34, maximum height of a handrail is 38. Now again, in the field, we normally install these at 36. So first off, do you see how a field answer would be wrong on the test? Because 36 is not the minimum or the maximum, that's just what we've always been taught to do in the field. By the way, the reason we do 36, and this will help you remember this is plus or minus 2 inches. So 36 plus 2 is your maximum of 38. 36 minus 2 is your minimum of 34. So if that helps you remember that any better. But minimum height of a handrail, 34. In other words, never lower than that. Maximum height of a handrail is 38, never more than that, right? And again, that's the height of a handrail on stairways for egress. Page 74. Top right, page 74, we got section 312, guards and window fall protection. So this used to be called section 312 guardrails, right? So back in the 06 or 09 code, they called it guardrails, and they quit calling it guardrails. So if you were to go to the index and look up guardrails, it would say C guards. So here are your guards, also known as guardrails, and window fall protection, right? So whatever kind of protection you have on the windows to keep you from falling out. 312.1 guard, so we're specifically talking about the guard. Also, you and I would call that the guard rail. Number 1, where required. So again, this is where guards are required for guard and window fall protection. So guards shall be provided for those portions of open-sided walking surfaces, including stairs, ramps, and landings that are located, what? Now I stopped here on purpose because this is a very simple question that a lot of people get wrong. So question on the exam might say, when are guardrails required? When the drop to the floor grade below is how far? People knee-jerk say 30 inches. Do you agree that's a lie? Guardrails are not required at 30 inches. Look what it says. Guards should be provided for those portions of open-sided walking surfaces, including stairs, ramps, and landings that are located, what? More than 30 inches. Measure vertically to the floor grade below. So basically the code's saying if you can fall 30 inches, go ahead and fall. We're okay with that. But if you can fall more than 30 inches, that's when we need a guardrail. Okay? So again, pay attention to that. What I would encourage you to do in your code book is when you come across words like that, underline them. More than, less than, exceeding, not exceeding. Be sure you're underlining those words, because our brains are so smart, they're trying to help us, and they say, hey, you're looking for a number, boom, there's a number 30 inches. But do you agree in this statement, 30 inches would be wrong? So more than 30 inches, that's when I need a guardrail, right? So again, choices on the test, just for example, might be 24 inches, 26 inches, 26, 28, 30, and 32, right? Again, 30 is a choice, and if we're not careful, we bite on that 30 when the question is really asking us when do we need it, and the code's really telling us you don't need it at 30. You need it at anything more than 30. Again, this is one of maybe the simplest questions on the test, but again, in my opinion, based on doing this for so long, these are the types of questions folks just like you get wrong. And I want to be clear, it's not because you're dumb, it's not because you're stupid, it's not because you're not smart, it's because your brain is so smart, it's trying to help you out, and it says you need a number, there's a number, 30 inches, let's go. Okay? But again, it clearly says more than 30 inches. Now I asked you to underline that. When you underline something, you immediately reprogram your brain. So you're saying, hey, don't lose this, right? So when you underline more than, your brain's already going to see the 30. So I don't care if you underline 30 or not. I need you to underline more than. By the way, you are allowed to underline in your books. You're not allowed to write notes in your book. So underlining is okay, you just can't write notes. So underlining's okay, highlighting's okay, circling's okay, just don't write any words in there. Again, testing companies not really afraid of what you're bringing in, they're afraid of what you're bringing out. They're afraid you're trying to steal test questions if they see writing in your book. So again, I need a guardrail not to fall more than 30 inches to the floor grade below. And then on page 79, we're jumping into section 317, which is protection of wood and wood-based products against decay. So again, I know exactly what I'm going to learn there. Location required. This is the location where this protection against decay is required. Protection of wood and wood-based products from decay shall be provided in the following locations by the use of natural durable wood or wood that is preserved and treated in accordance with the AWPA U1. Now I want to stop there for a second. Again, the AWPA, that is a totally separate set of standards. That's like the National Electrical Code and the Uniform Plumbing Code and the International Residential Code. They're a completely different set of standards. The American with Disability Act, right? So that AWPA, that's a whole nother set of standards. So I just tell you that because it doesn't mean anything to us. We didn't learn anything there. It says, do it like the AWPA tells us to do it, right? And then, number one, wood joists are the bottom of the wood structural floor were closer than 18 inches. Now again, stop there. Closer than 18 inches. Do you agree if I'm 18 inches off, I'm good, I don't have to do anything. But if I'm a wood joist or the bottom of a wood structural floor, either one, and I'm closer than 18 inches to the ground, then I need decay protection. Or the exposed ground and crawl spaces or unexcavated areas located within the periphery of the building foundation. So again, that means anywhere you're measuring underneath that floor, if you're within, if you're closer than 18 inches to the wood joist or the bottom of the wood structure, or closer than 12 inches to the wood girder to the exposed ground, right? So again, wrong answer very commonly there would be 18 inches or 12 inches when the answer says, or the code's telling you, hey, I need protection not at 18 and not at 12. I need it when I'm closer than 18 if I'm a wood joist or the bottom wood structural floor. And if I'm closer, less than 12 inches on a wood girder. Number two, wood framing members that rest on concrete or masonry exterior foundation walls and or less than 8 inches from the exposed ground. Again, what do you see there? Less than 8 inches. The most common wrong answer is 8 inches. And again, they'll give you choices like 6, 8, 10, and 12. Well, 6 is less than 8. 8 is probably the most common wrong answer people pick because they see 8 inches, 8 inches. But less than 8, that would be 6. 8's not less, 10's not less, 12's not less. Okay? So again, pay attention to that question. No tricks. There's no tricks on the test. So this is not a trick question, the things we've been talking about, but if you don't pay attention, remember we talked about interpretation at the very beginning of this class. To interpret it properly, you got to read it word for word, and word for word it says wood, framing, members that rest on concrete or masonry exterior foundation walls and are less than 8 inches from the exposed ground. So if you're 8 inches off the ground, you're golden. Don't do anything. You're good. Number 3, seals and sleepers on a concrete or masonry slab that is in direct contact with the ground unless separated from such slab by an impervious moisture barrier. So one of the impervious moisture barriers we use is we have that poly insulation that we put down right below, for example, a bottom plate. So if you've got a seal or a sleeper on concrete or masonry slab that is in direct contact with the ground, unless separated from such slab by an impervious moisture barrier. So my slab's in contact with the ground, but I put an impervious moisture barrier, then that seal does not have to be wood protected from decay, right? Page 80. Page 80. Top right, section 318, protection against subterranean termites. So termites below the grade. So again, we know exactly what we're going to learn, and we're worried about termites, so below the grade. So we're going to tell us how to protect it or when it needs to be protected or whatever, how long it needs to be protected. So again, 318.1, subterranean termites, control methods, 318.2, chemical treatment, and then .3, barriers, and .4, foam plastic protection. So question on the exam says, hey, when you're protecting against subterranean termites using foam plastic protection, what do you have to do? It says in areas where probability of termite infestation is very high. So first off, if you're not very high, this rule is not applying to you, as indicated in figure 301.2, number 7. So that'll give you an area breakdown. Extruded and expanded polystyrene or other foam plastic shall not be installed on the exterior face of under interior or exterior foundation walls or slab foundations located below grade. The clearance between the foam plastic installed above grade and the exposed earth shall be not less than 6 inches. So they're saying, hey, from the exposed ground, we're worried about subterranean termites. I want this foam plastic protection to be at least 6 inches above the ground. The clearance between the foam plastic installed above grade and exposed earth shall be not less than 6 inches. So between the grade and the top, got to be at least 6 inches for this foam plastic protection for subterranean termites.